The space station Vanguard 12 floated in the endless darkness, a lonely outpost on the edge of human space. Inside, Captain Daniel Mercer sat in a small, dimly lit cafe, sipping his usual black coffee. The place was quiet, except for the occasional chatter of traders and mercenaries passing through. It was just another ordinary day, until she arrived. A hooded figure entered the cafe, moving cautiously, as if afraid of being noticed. Mercer barely glanced up at first. Space stations always had strange visitors. But then she approached his table, and he saw her face. She wasn't human. Her features were sharp yet delicate, her skin a pale silver blue that shimmered slightly under the station's lights. Two small horns curled back from her forehead, and her deep violet eyes looked at him with something he didn't expect: desperation. She knelt before him. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Take me as your servant." Mercer blinked, setting down his coffee. He glanced around, noticing the sudden silence. A few people were staring, but most ignored the scene. He sighed. He had seen many strange things in his time as a captain, but this was new. "You want to run that by me again?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, lowering her head. I am Xilari." Mercer frowned. He had heard of the Xilari. Once, they were a proud and powerful race, known for their beauty, intelligence, and strong empire. But that was before the war. 5 years ago, their empire fell to a stronger alien force, the Zarkali Dominion. Now, the Xilari were scattered, their people enslaved or hunted. He studied the woman before him. She was thin, wearing a worn-out cloak over what looked like a once elegant outfit. She had been someone important once. "Stand up," Mercer said. She hesitated but obeyed, her hands trembling. "You don't have to kneel. Humans don't do that kind of thing," he said. She looked at him with confusion. "But I have nothing to offer. No home, no wealth. I am a burden. If you do not take me, I will be captured, or worse." Mercer exhaled slowly, running a hand through his short brown hair. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't some noble warrior. He was just a captain trying to survive in a universe that didn't care about honor or mercy. But something about this woman's hopelessness made him hesitate. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lirani." "All right, Lirani," he said. "Why me? Why not someone else?" She looked away. "Because humans are different." That caught his attention. "How so?" Lirani swallowed hard. "Other races see the weak as prey. The Zarkali, the Torgans, even my own people before we fell. They respect only power. But humans," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "You fight for more than just strength. You protect the weak. You stand against those who think they are above others. Even in war, you show mercy." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "You've been studying us." She nodded. "I had to. The Xilari have no allies now. We thought we were the greatest, until we lost everything. But humans, no one thought you could stand against the great empires of the galaxy. And yet you did. You survived. You won." Mercer didn't reply. She wasn't wrong. Humanity had been underestimated. When the larger galactic powers tried to suppress them, humans fought back. Hard. They didn't have the strongest fleets, but they had something else. Determination. He looked at Lirani again. She was exhausted, starving, and clearly terrified. But in her eyes, he saw something else. Hope. He sighed. "I don't take servants." Her face fell. "But," he continued, "I do need a crew member." She blinked. "Crew member. You want to survive. Then stand on your own feet. You work, you eat. You pull your weight, you stay. No kneeling, no servitude, just a chance." Lirani's lips parted in shock. "You would allow that?" Mercer shrugged. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I won't turn away someone who needs help." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she straightened, wiping her eyes. I will do my best." He gave a small nod and gestured toward the exit. "Come on. Let's get you cleaned up. Welcome aboard, Lirani." As they left the cafe, Mercer had a feeling his life was about to get a lot more complicated. But as he glanced at the woman walking beside him, he knew one thing for sure. She wasn't just another lost soul. She was a survivor. And in a universe that crushed the weak, survivors were the ones who changed everything. Lirani followed Captain Mercer through the long, metallic hallways of Vanguard 12. The space station was old, its walls covered in scratches and rust stains. Humans always built things to last, even if they weren't pretty. She kept her head low, feeling the stares of passing crew members and travelers. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. A Xilari walking beside a human captain. It was an unusual sight. But she didn't care about their stares. She had made her choice. Mercer led her into a small docking bay where a ship was waiting. It wasn't grand or powerful, but it had a sturdy, reliable look. The hull was marked with battle scars, and the name Star Hunter was painted in bold letters across the side. Lirani hesitated. "This is your ship." Mercer smirked. "Not what you expected." She shook her head. "It is smaller than I thought." He chuckled. "She's not a warship, if that's what you're thinking. But she's fast, tough, and gets the job done." He walked up the ramp, motioning for her to follow. As she stepped inside, she was surprised by how simple it was. The corridors were narrow, and everything had a practical design. No luxury, no unnecessary decorations. She had grown up in the grand palaces of Silari Prime, where everything was beautiful and elegant. This ship was different. It was a warrior's ship. "Come on," Mercer said. "Let's get you settled." He led her to a small room with a narrow bed, a locker, and a single chair. It was plain but clean. "This will be your quarters," he said. "Not much, but it's yours." Lirani placed a hand on the wall, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, she had a place to stay. It wasn't a palace, but it was hers. "I thank you," she said softly. Mercer crossed his arms. "All right, let's talk about the rules." She straightened. "Rules? You said you wanted to be part of the crew, right?" he asked. "That means you work. No special treatment." She nodded. "I understand." "Good," he said. "You'll start by helping with ship maintenance and navigation. If you want to eat, you'll have to earn it." Lirani stiffened. She had never done physical labor before. Silari nobles didn't work with their hands. But she had no choice now. "I will do my best," she said. Mercer studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll see how you handle it." First lesson. The next day, Lirani found herself in the engine room, standing next to a gruff-looking man with a thick beard. His name was Davis, the ship's chief engineer. He handed her a tool. "All right, princess, let's see what you can do." She frowned. "I am not a princess." "Could have fooled me," Davis muttered. "Fine, whatever you are, get to work. That pipe over there needs fixing." Lirani looked at the metal pipe he was pointing at. It was leaking steam. I do not know how," she admitted. Davis sighed. "Figures. All right, listen carefully." He showed her how to tighten the bolts and seal the leak. It seemed simple, but as she tried to copy his movements, she realized how difficult it was. Her hands were not used to such work. By the time she finished, her fingers were sore, and she was covered in grease. Davis chuckled. "Not bad for a first try." Lirani looked at her dirty hands and frowned. She had never been this messy before, but strangely, she didn't hate it. The human way. Later that evening, she sat in the mess hall with the crew. The room was filled with laughter and conversation. Humans were strange, always joking, always loud. Mercer placed a tray of food in front of her. "Eat." She hesitated. "I have not earned it yet." He rolled his eyes. "You worked today, didn't you?" "Yes, but..." Then eat. She looked down at the food. Simple rations, nothing fancy. She took a bite, expecting it to be terrible. It wasn't. It was warm, filling. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a lost exile. She felt like part of something, a new purpose. Later that night, Mercer found her on the observation deck, staring at the stars. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded. "I was useless today." "You weren't useless," he said. "You learned." She looked at him. "You could have refused me. Why did you accept me?" Mercer leaned against the railing. "Because humans don't believe in leaving people behind. You wanted a chance. I gave you one." Lirani was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I want to be stronger." Mercer smiled. "Then you're in the right place." As the stars stretched before them, Lirani knew she had made the right choice. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to walk it. Lirani wiped the sweat from her brow, her fingers aching from the long hours of work in Star Hunter's engine room. It had been a week since Captain Mercer had taken her in, and she was slowly adjusting to life among humans. She was no longer the helpless noblewoman who had knelt before him. Now she was learning how to repair machines, how to navigate a starship, how to survive without status or privilege. She still made mistakes, but Mercer never treated her like a fragile thing. He expected her to pull her weight, and she was determined not to disappoint him. But deep inside, she still felt uneasy. Her past had not disappeared. It was only waiting in the shadows. A warning from the past. The Star Hunter had docked at Haven 47, a small trading station on the edge of human space. The crew needed supplies, and Mercer had a business deal to take care of. "Stay close," he told Lirani as they walked through the market district. "This place isn't dangerous, but it's not exactly safe either." She nodded, adjusting the simple jacket she wore over her old Siluri robes. Humans no longer stared at her like she was an alien curiosity, but she still felt exposed. As they moved through the crowd, she suddenly felt a presence, someone watching her. Her heart pounded. She turned sharply and saw him. A tall, armored figure stood at the end of the market, his piercing yellow eyes locked onto her. A Zarkali soldier. Lirani's blood ran cold. The Zarkali Dominion. The conquerors of her people. Her breath quickened as the soldier reached for a communicator. "He recognized me," she whispered. Mercer saw him too. His expression hardened. "Time to go." They moved quickly, slipping through the crowd, but the Zarkali was not alone. More soldiers appeared, blocking their way. "They're looking for me," Lirani said. Mercer glanced at her. "Why?" She swallowed hard. "Because I am not just any Xilari." The truth revealed. Back on the Star Hunter, Lirani sat in the crew quarters, her hands trembling as Mercer stood in front of her, arms crossed. "Start talking," he said. She closed her eyes. "My name is not just Lirani. My full name is Lirani Velthar. I am the last surviving heir of the Silari royal bloodline." Mercer didn't react immediately. Then he sighed. "Of course you are." "I did not lie," she said quickly. "I only left out the truth." He rubbed his forehead. "And now the Zarkali want you dead." She nodded. "The war destroyed my family. When the Zarkali conquered us, they killed my parents and my people's leaders. I was smuggled away before they could find me. If they learn I am alive, they will hunt me until I am gone." Mercer leaned against the wall. "And that soldier today. He must have recognized me," she said. "The Zarkali do not leave loose ends." Silence filled the room. Then Mercer said, "All right." Lirani blinked. "That is all." He shrugged. "It doesn't change anything. You're still my crew." She stared at him. "You do not understand. If you keep me here, you will become a target. The Zarkali will not stop until—" "I know what kind of people they are," Mercer interrupted. "But I don't abandon my crew." Lirani clenched her fists. "You are a fool." Mercer smirked. "Maybe." She shook her head. feeling a strange mix of frustration and something else. No one had ever stood beside her like this before, and now she feared it would cost him everything. The warlord's message. Hours later, a message came through the ship's comms. "This is Warlord Varric of the Zarkili Dominion," a deep voice said. "Captain Mercer, we know you are harboring a fugitive. Turn her over, and we will allow you to leave in peace." Lirani froze. Varric. He was the traitor, a former Xilari general who had betrayed her people and joined the Zarkili. He was one of the reasons her world had fallen. Mercer crossed his arms, looking at the transmission. "And if I refuse?" Varric chuckled. "Then you will burn." The message ended. Lirani turned to Mercer. "You should leave me here. Let me go before." "Not happening," Mercer said. "They want a fight. They'll get one." She shook her head. "You do not understand. Varric is ruthless. He will not stop." Mercer grinned. "Neither do humans." The battle begins. Alarms rang through the station as Zarkili ships approached. The Star Hunter was fast, but against an entire fleet, speed wouldn't be enough. "Davis," Mercer called. "Power up the engines. We're getting out of here." Lirani sat at the co-pilot's seat. She had studied human ship controls, but now, with a real battle ahead, her hands trembled. Mercer noticed. "You good?" She took a deep breath. "Yes." The ship roared to life, and they blasted out of the station. Behind them, Zarkili fighters followed. "Hold on," Mercer muttered, gripping the controls. "This is gonna get rough." The Star Hunter trembled as plasma fire exploded behind it. The Zarkili ships were closing in, their glowing weapons lighting up the void like burning stars. Lirani gripped the co-pilot's seat, her heart pounding. She had never been in a real space battle before. Her people had once ruled the skies with powerful warships, but now she was running for her life in a single human freighter. And yet, Captain Mercer wasn't afraid. "Davis, give me more power to the thrusters," he barked over the comms. A voice crackled back. "I'm pushing this girl as hard as she'll go, Captain. Any more, and we'll fry the engines. Then let's make it count." Mercer jerked the controls, sending the Star Hunter into a steep dive. Enemy blasts whizzed past, barely missing their hull. The human ship was outgunned, but it was faster than the Zarkili warships. "For now. They're trying to hurt us," Lirani said, her eyes scanning the sensors. "They're cutting off our escape routes." Mercer frowned. "Any bright ideas, Princess?" She flinched at the word. She wasn't a princess anymore. She was just a survivor. But she did have an idea. "The asteroid belt ahead," she said, pointing to the navigation screen. "It's unstable, full of moving debris, too dangerous for their large ships to follow." Mercer grinned. "Now that's a plan." He pushed the ship forward, heading straight for the asteroid field. Behind them, the Zarkili commander's voice crackled over the comms. "Mercer, you cannot run forever. Surrender the girl, and we will let you live." Mercer rolled his eyes. "You ever met a human who surrenders?" He cut the comms before they could answer. A dance with death. The asteroid field was a chaotic mess of spinning rocks, some as small as pebbles, others the size of entire ships. The Star Hunter dived into the storm, twisting and weaving between deadly obstacles. Lirani held her breath as a massive asteroid passed just meters away from their wing. "Are you sure this is better than fighting?" she asked. "Absolutely," Mercer said, grinning. "This is fun." She stared at him, wondering if all humans were this reckless. Behind them, the Zarkili ships hesitated. Their larger vessels could not follow, but their smaller fighters dared to enter. "They're still coming," Lirani warned. Mercer didn't respond. Instead, he flipped a switch. "Davis, dump the scrap." In the cargo hold, a hatch opened, releasing a cloud of metal debris. Old ship parts, broken equipment, anything they didn't need. The sudden explosion of objects forced the enemy fighters to slow down. One wasn't fast enough, and crashed into an asteroid, disappearing in a fiery explosion. Little Annie's eyes widened. That was effective, Mercer smirked. She shook her head. You fight like pirates. He chuckled. Pirates wish they were this good. The trap. As they neared the edge of the asteroid field, Little Annie's relief was short-lived. The moment they emerged, a massive Zarkali warship was waiting for them. It's an ambush, she whispered. Mercer cursed. They're smarter than I thought. The warship's weapons locked onto them. They were too close to escape. A voice came over the comms. This is Warlord Varric. Your little game ends here. Little Annie's grip tightened. Varric, the traitor who had destroyed her world. I should surrender, she said suddenly. Mercer's head snapped toward her. What? If I go with them, they will let you live. He gave her a hard look. Do you really believe that? She hesitated. No, the Zarkali did not leave loose ends. But if she stayed, Mercer and his crew would die for her. Mercer sighed. Listen, Little Annie, I told you before, humans don't leave people behind. You're one of us now. Her chest tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. Varric's voice came again. Last chance, Mercer. Hand her over, or die. Mercer grinned. Davis, you got that surprise ready. Davis's voice crackled back. Oh, you're gonna love this, Captain. Mercer turned to Little Annie. Hang on tight. The human way. Without warning, the Star Hunter's engines flared bright blue. Instead of running, Mercer charged straight toward the warship. What are you doing? Little Annie gasped. Something stupid, Mercer replied. At the last second, Davis activated the ship's EMP blast. A wave of energy surged outward, hitting the Zarkali warship. The massive vessel flickered, then went dark. No way, Little Annie whispered. The enemy ship's engines failed. Their weapons powered down. For a few precious moments, the mighty warship was nothing more than a floating metal shell. That was our only EMP, Davis warned. That's all we needed, Mercer said. Now, let's get out of here. With a roar, the Star Hunter blasted away. By the time the Zarkali rebooted their systems, Mercer and his crew were long gone. A new resolve. Hours later, the crew sat around the mess hall, exhausted but alive. Little Annie stared down at her hands, still shaking from the adrenaline. She had spent years running, believing she was alone. But now, sitting among these humans, these reckless, foolish, but brave humans, she realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. Mercer sat beside her, drinking his usual black coffee. Still think you should have surrendered? She shook her head. No, I see now. Humans do not fight for survival alone. You fight for each other. Mercer smirked. Took you long enough to figure that out. Little Annie looked at him, determination in her eyes. I want to fight too, she said, not just to survive, but to take back what was stolen from my people. Mercer raised an eyebrow. You're talking about something bigger than just running, aren't you? She nodded. The Zarkali destroyed my home. I will not run from them anymore. Mercer leaned back. Well, if that's the case, you're in the right place. Little Annie felt a fire inside her, a fire she had thought was long dead. The war for Xilari was not over. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. The Star Hunter drifted silently in the dark void of space, hidden behind the shadow of a dead moon. The crew was recovering from their narrow escape, but the danger was far from over. Little Annie sat in the dimly lit mess hall, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. Her hands were clenched into fists. She had spent years running, but now, for the first time, she was thinking about fighting back. Captain Mercer entered, holding his usual cup of black coffee. He leaned against the wall and took a sip before speaking. You've got that look, he said. Little Annie glanced at him. What look? The I'm about to do something crazy look. She exhaled. I want to strike back. Mercer raised an eyebrow. Against the Zarkali. She nodded. They took everything from my people. They destroyed my home. And now, they are hunting me like I am nothing. Mercer sighed, placing his coffee down. Lirani, I get it. You want revenge. But fighting an empire isn't exactly easy. I do not want revenge, she said firmly. I want justice. Mercer studied her for a long moment. Then he smirked. All right, he said. Let's hear your plan. The impossible task. The crew gathered around the table as Liriani pulled up the map. There is a prison station in Zarkali territory, she explained. It holds high-ranking prisoners from the war, former Silari generals, resistance leaders, and scientists. If we free them, we will have the beginning of a real rebellion. Davis whistled. Breaking into a Zarkali prison. That's suicide. We would not be breaking in, Lirani said. We would be breaking them out. Mercer rubbed his chin. A jailbreak, ah. Lirani nodded. These prisoners are the last hope for my people. Without them, we have no chance of fighting back. Silence filled the room. The mission was insane. But then Mercer grinned. I've done crazier things. Davis groaned. We always do crazier things. Mercer turned to Lirani. All right, princess. We're in. Lirani felt something strange, a warmth in her chest. For the first time in a long while, she was not alone in this fight. The infiltration plan. Over the next few days, they gathered information on the prison station. The facility, called Vraxis 9, was a floating fortress deep in Zarkali space. It was heavily guarded, with automated defenses and elite soldiers stationed at every level. Breaking in was impossible. Unless we pose as prisoners, Lirani suggested. Mercer frowned. Come again. The Zarkali think I am still on the run. If I let them capture me, they will take me to the prison. Once inside, I can disable security and open the doors for you. Davis laughed nervously. You want to get captured on purpose. Lirani nodded. It is the only way. Mercer sighed, rubbing his temples. I hate this plan. But it will work, Lirani said. Mercer looked at her. You really trust us to get you out? She hesitated. Then she nodded. Yes. Mercer smirked. Then let's make it happen. Into the lion's den. 2 days later, the Star Hunter floated near a Zarkali patrol route. Lirani stood in the cargo hold, dressed in tattered clothes to make her look like a desperate fugitive. She felt nervous, but she pushed it down. Mercer walked up to her. Last chance to back out. She shook her head. No, I am ready. He nodded. Then, in a rare moment of seriousness, he placed a hand on her shoulder. We will come for you. Lirani met his gaze. I know. Moments later, she entered the escape pod and launched toward the patrol ship. The Zarkalid did not hesitate. They captured her instantly. As the doors of the patrol ship closed around her, Lirani took one last deep breath. The trap was set. Now, all she had to do was survive long enough for Mercer to break her out. Lirani sat in the cold, metal cell of Vraxis 9, her wrists bound by energy cuffs. The prison was dark and silent, except for the hum of security drones that floated through the hallways. She had been here for 2 days, waiting for the right moment, waiting for Mercer and the crew to come. She knew they would, but time was running out. The Zarkali guards had not treated her kindly. They knew she was important. The only reason they had not executed her yet was because they wanted information she would never give. Her body ached, but her mind was sharp. She had to be ready when the moment came. And then it did. A silent infiltration. Deep in the void of space, the Star Hunter approached Vraxis 9 under the cover of a passing asteroid field. All right, crew, Mercer said, his voice calm but focused. This is the part where we either become legends or space dust. Davis, sitting at the controls, sighed. Why do I feel like it's usually the second option? Mercer grinned. Because it's more exciting that way. The plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. They had stolen an old Zarkali cargo ship and filled it with explosives. Davis would pilot it toward the station, making it look like a routine supply drop. Once inside the docking bay, they would blow open the gates, disable security, and storm the prison. It was reckless. It was insane. It was human. The explosion. The stolen cargo ship drifted toward the station. The Zarkali guards scanned it and found nothing unusual. "Supply vessel, proceed to docking bay 3. A voice crackled over the comms. Davis smirked. They'd really need better security. As soon as the ship landed, he pressed a button. Boom. The entire docking bay shook as a massive explosion ripped through the entrance. Fire and smoke filled the air, and alarms screamed through the station. Inside her cell, Lurani's head snapped up. They're here. She took a deep breath and prepared herself. Fighting through fire, Mercer and his team charged into the chaos. Blasters firing. The Zarkali guards scrambled to react, but they were too slow. Davis tossed a grenade, taking out a group of enemies. "We need to move fast. Reinforcements are coming." Mercer tapped his comms. "Lurani, do you copy?" A voice crackled back. "I'm here." "Where are you?" "Cell block C," she said. "But the security system is still active. I can disable it, but I need time." Mercer nodded. "We'll buy you time." Lurani closed her eyes and focused. She had memorized the prison's systems from stolen blueprints. She knew exactly what to do. She reached out, using a stolen guard's ID card to hack into the prison's network. Her fingers flew across the control panel. The screen flashed warnings, but she ignored them. And then, CLITK. Every cell door in cell block C slid open. The prisoners inside, weak but alive, stepped out in shock. Auxiliary General, his face scared but his eyes still burning with fire, looked at Lurani. You freed us." She nodded. "We don't have much time. Follow me if you want to fight back." The prisoners didn't hesitate. The final stand. Alarms blared as Zarkali reinforcements rushed into the halls. The battle had begun. Lurani led the freed prisoners through the corridors, picking up weapons from fallen guards. The Auxiliary, though weakened, fought like warriors. Blaster fire filled the air as Mercer and his crew met them halfway. "Nice work, Princess," Mercer said, tossing her a blaster. She caught it easily. "We're not done yet." Davis shouted from the side. "Bad news, Captain. Enemy warships are inbound. We've got about 5 minutes before we're completely surrounded." Mercer cursed. "Then let's get out of here." They raced toward the escape route, but just as they reached the docking bay, a familiar voice echoed through the station. "You thought you could escape so easily." Lurani froze. Standing before them was Warlord Varric, his Zarkali elite soldiers at his side. His golden armor gleamed under the flickering prison lights. "You should have stayed in hiding, little princess," Varric said, his voice cold. "Now you will die here with your human friends." Lurani clenched her fists. "Not this time." Mercer raised his blaster. "We'll see about that." The air in Vraxis 9 was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. Blaster fire flashed in every direction, illuminating the dark prison corridors as alarms blared. Lurani stood in front of her crew, her blaster raised. Across from her, Warlord Varric stood tall in his golden armor, his reptilian eyes filled with cruel amusement. His elite guards flanked him, weapons drawn. "You are surrounded," Varric said, his voice calm but dangerous. "Surrender now, and I may let your human friends live." Lurani's grip on her blaster tightened. "I would rather die than bow to you," she spat. Varric chuckled. "Then you will get your wish." A fight against the impossible. Before anyone could move, Mercer fired first. His shot hit Varric's shoulder, making the warlord snarl in pain. The room exploded into chaos as both sides opened fire. Davis threw a flash grenade, blinding the Zarkali troops for a moment. Go, Go, go. Lear Annie and the freed prisoners charged forward. Blaster bolts filled the air. The auxiliary prisoners fought with everything they had, using stolen weapons and sheer desperation. Mercer dodged a strike from one of the elite guards, countering with a knife to the throat. Lear Annie took cover behind a broken console, her heart pounding. Varric was too strong. His armor deflected most shots, and his elite guards were relentless. But she was not going to run. Not this time. A risky plan. Lear Annie turned to Mercer. We can't win like this. We need to seal the docking bay and trap them inside. Mercer glanced at the massive blast doors behind them. If we close them, we cut off our only escape route. She nodded. Yes, but if we don't, we all die. Mercer cursed under his breath. Then he grinned. All right, princess. Let's make some history. The trap is set. Lear Annie sprinted toward the control panel while Mercer and Davis covered her. She ducked behind fallen debris, dodging incoming fire. One of Varric's guards lunged at her, but she twisted away and fired a shot, dropping him instantly. Her hands flew over the controls. Warning lights flashed. The station's blast doors began to close. Varric's eyes widened. Stop them, he roared. But it was too late. The massive steel doors slammed shut, trapping Varric and his remaining troops inside the docking bay. Lear Annie turned back to Mercer. Now, the great escape. Mercer grabbed his comms. Davis, light it up. Davis, still carrying a detonator from their earlier explosives, grinned and pressed the button. Boom! A massive explosion erupted from the docking bay, tearing through the station structure. The force of it sent shockwaves through the corridors, knocking everyone off their feet. Varric and his troops were engulfed in fire. Mercer pulled Lear Annie up. Time to go. The group sprinted through the crumbling prison, heading toward the hangar where the Star Hunter was waiting. Zarkli warships were already in orbit, but they were too late. The station was falling apart. Lear Annie, Mercer, Davis, and the freed prisoners raced onto the ship. Punch it, Davis, Mercer shouted. The Star Hunter's engines roared to life. The ship blasted out of the crumbling station, dodging enemy fire as it disappeared into the void. A new beginning. For a long moment, no one spoke. Lear Annie sat in the cockpit, breathing heavily. She looked out the window at the burning remains of Raxus 9. It was over. Varric was gone. The prisoners were free. For the first time in years, she felt something strange. Hope. Mercer clapped a hand on her shoulder. You did good, princess. She turned to him, her eyes shining. I could not have done it without you. Davis smirked. So, what now? We just made the Zarkli our mortal enemies. Lear Annie smiled. Now we fight. Mercer grinned. I like the sound of that. As the Star Hunter disappeared into the stars, Lear Annie knew this was just the beginning. The rebellion had begun.